So without further ado, it is now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker for today, Dr. Ayaz Ismail, our fellow CPIF and also Director, Islamic Wholesale Banking from the CIMB Islamic. Dr. Ayaz is an accomplished professional with extensive experience in Islamic finance, law, and business administration. He holds a PhD in Islamic finance from INSEAD, an MBA, Financial Studies from the University of Nottingham, a CPIF qualification from CIIF, and earlier qualifications in Shariah law, legal practice, and business studies. He has over a decade of experience at CIMB Islamic, leading Islamic wholesale banking and managing Islamic capital market products, particularly sukuk structuring, advisory for Islamic IPOs, and corporate exercises. He also serves as the alternate chairman of the Islamic Capital Markets Committee at MIBA, a Grand Councillor of CIIF, and previously held leadership roles at CIMB Berhad. We are honored to have him sharing his insights with us today. Welcome, Dr. Ayaz. I pass the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina, for that introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, my name is Ayaz Ismail from CIIF, and welcome to the webinar, Innovative Sukuk Models for Africa, Sustainability, Green Sukuk, and Impact Financing. My presentation today is going to be in three parts. The first part will be a brief introduction to Sukuk and Green and Sustainability Sukuk. The second part would be on some case studies. And the third part would be about building a green Sukuk ecosystem. Now, the objective of the session today is to give you an overview of green and sustainability Sukuk so that it may be a catalyst for conversations that we could have in the weeks and months to come. On that note, allow me to begin my presentation with the first part. Right. Now, Malaysia is the world's largest and most active Sukuk market. And on this part of the world in Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Philippines have shown great progress in developing their Sukuk market, and Brunei has shown a lot of desire as well to introduce and create a Sukuk market of their own. Over in the GCC, we see that Saudi Arabia and the UAE are tapping the Sukuk market in big numbers, especially in recent years. So the next frontier for Sukuk, it would be Africa. More specifically, green and sustainability Sukuk, they are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, ESG investment mandates, and critical climate adaptation needs across the continent. Now, what is Sukuk? Sukuk, they are Shariah compliant certificates. They represent beneficial ownership, intangible assets, infrastructure projects, or specified cash flows. They're built on transparent and ethical investment standards. And some of the common structures that were used to structure Sukuk, they include Ijarah, Murabaha, Wakalah, and Musyarakah. Now, at the end of the day, we must remember that Sukuk is an instrument to raise funding. And this funding, they are to be used for specific purposes. You may or may not be aware of this, but Sukuk is one of the most well-known and most accepted Islamic finance instrument out there. In other words, Sukuk is the poster boy of Islamic finance. Why? Why is it as such? The reason is because Sukuk may be issued and it operates well within the existing parameters of the debt capital markets. We can design a Sukuk to fit comfortably within the existing regulations and the existing requirements of fixed income investors around the world in a Sharia compliant manner. Now, over the years, an increasing number of global fixed income investors have become comfortable with Sukuk and have no issues adding Sukuk to their portfolio. This in turn has encouraged more issuers to explore issuing Sukuk instead of conventional bonds. Now, this is also the reason why issuers are able to tap global capital markets via green and sustainability Sukuk, which is what we're talking about today. Now, whilst it's true that some pure green and sustainability investors may not have mandates which allow them to invest in Sukuk, it is a matter of time for them to open up to the Sharia compliant version of green and sustainability bonds. Now, why? Why Sukuk for Africa? There are a number of reasons why this could be the case. First, we know that Africa faces $100 billion annual infrastructure deficit, and Sukuk can bridge this critical funding gap. Next, the demographics and the market sophistication in East Africa has been evolving, and we see that there is a rapid expansion of demand for Sharia-compliant financial products, and this could include Sukuk as well. Now, next, there is a lot of capital around the world that is looking for the right assets to invest in. And we believe that if Africa were to embrace green and sustainability Sukuk, it would be able to attract long-term funding from the GCC markets, from Asia, and also from global ESG-focused investors. Now, finally, Sukuk, they embrace inclusive development. It supports financial inclusion initiatives, and it drives sustainable economic development that could benefit a broader community. Now, what are green, sustainable, and impact Sukuk? Green Sukuk refers to a Sukuk where the proceeds that are raised from those issuances, they are utilized for specific green projects. And these projects tend to be climate positive or environmentally beneficial projects, such as renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure. Sustainability Sukuk means the proceeds that are raised from that Sukuk, they are used for specific sustainability projects. And this combines both environmental and social objectives. Impact Sukuk, on the other hand, it measures outcomes, and the investors in Impact Sukuk, they get their returns depending on how well the issuer performs against certain indicators. Now, you may have heard that the principles of Islamic finance align with the principles of sustainability. To expand on this point, between Sharia-compliant investing and sustainable investing, there are parallels at a practical level. Sharia-compliant investing requires the exclusion of certain industries such as tobacco, alcohol, and gambling. Now, likewise, sustainable investing uses negative screens to omit companies whose activities are not aligned with the investment mandate. And in many cases, these negative screens will include industries such as tobacco that are also incompatible with Sharia-compliant investing. Now, the next question is, what is making investors hungry for green and sustainable Sukuk? It is a combination of factors. Firstly, externally, governments and regulators are pushing the sustainability agenda in numerous ways. And I believe it will be the same case in Somalia and in the rest of the region as well. In some jurisdictions, they are well on the path towards achieving their Paris Agreement commitments. This requires the entire system, the entire ecosystem of stakeholders to be on board, and some sooner than others. Next, internally, the investors' stakeholders are beginning to pay more attention to the portfolios of these investors. Where is their money being invested? Is it supporting activities that contribute to or mitigate climate change? These stakeholders are beginning to ask questions related to sustainability, and the expectation is clear. Stakeholders are moving in the direction of sustainability. So, what can East Africa finance via green and sustainability Sukuk? Now, on this slide, we've put potential projects that could be financed via these type of issuances. And the first would be renewable energy. Now, when it comes to green Sukuk issuances, it is quite common to find that the proceeds are used to finance renewable energy projects. These are projects such as solar farms, wind installations, and hydroelectric projects. Next, water and sanitation. This includes infrastructure for clean water and waste management systems. Next, financing climate resilient agriculture, including drought-resistant crops, efficient irrigation, and sustainable farming technologies. Next, transport and logistics, green transportation networks and efficient supply chain infrastructure, affordable housing, and also digital infrastructure, technology platforms supporting financial inclusion and digital transformation. These are just a small selection of potential initiatives and projects that would fit very well within the projects that could be financed by green or sustainable sukuk. Now, why do we feel that East Africa is ready to consider green and sustainability sukuk? Now, first, the expansion of Islamic banking across the region. We see growing presence of Islamic banking and finance across Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti, for example. Regulatory momentum. Now, all stakeholders play an important role to ensure the growth of an efficient sukuk market. Having said that, there are clear benefits of the regulator driving the industry's efforts. This was clearly the case over the past 2 decades in Malaysia, where under the leadership of the Securities Commission, Malaysia developed into a global Islamic capital market hub. Therefore, the regulatory momentum providing strong policy support towards introducing of sukuk frameworks is critical when we're talking about the jurisdiction being ready to issue green and sustainability sukuk. Next, the urgency of climate finance. We see that there are certain parts of the region that are highly vulnerable to climate change, and this creates immediate funding needs and investor appetite. As I mentioned, there's a lot of capital out there that's actively seeking the right assets to invest in, and Africa-focused sustainability projects could be well within the investment parameters of the owners of this capital. Now, I go on now to the second part of my presentation, case studies, and I will begin with Malaysia's green sukuk. In 2017, Malaysia became the first country in the world to issue green sukuk through a company called Tadau Energy. The proceeds from this sukuk issuance were used to finance large-scale energy farms. And the framework, the green sukuk framework of Tadau Energy, it aligned with both the green bond principles and also Shariah requirements. There were a number of factors that played a key role in ensuring the success of this issuance. They included regulatory clarity, government incentives, and of course, the way we structured the financing. Now, the key takeaway from this debut sukuk issuance in Malaysia was that we demonstrated that green sukuk could successfully attract both Islamic investors and also ESG-focused institutional investors. And this laid out a new path, not only for issuers within Malaysia, onshore in Malaysia, but it also gave a good indication to the emerging markets in the region as to the possibilities that green sukuk could open up for them. Indonesia's sovereign green sukuk. Now, Indonesia is the world's most prolific issuer of sovereign sukuk, and they're also the world's most prolific issuer of sovereign green sukuk. They've issued over $4 billion worth of green sukuk since 2018. Now, what are the proceeds of this green sukuk used for? There are a number of utilization purposes. This include climate change mitigation initiatives, forest protection and reforestation programs, renewable energy infrastructure development, and also sustainable transportation networks. And after a number of years, these issuances have been highly popular with ESG-focused investors. I mentioned earlier that in the initial stages, ESG-focused investors may not be able to invest in sukuk, but in the case of the sovereign green sukuk of Indonesia, after a number of issuances, we saw issuers who initially could not come into the issuance, they opened up their investment mandate to include sukuk, and we've seen them coming into the book and being quite happy to invest in the sukuk of government of Indonesia. Next, over in the GCC. Now, in the United Arab Emirates, they've pioneered sustainability-linked sukuk in the region, and this type of sukuk, they focus on energy transition projects and smart city infrastructure. In Saudi Arabia, we've heard of Vision 2030. It's an ambitious project over a number of years, and the Saudi Arabian government has been issuing green and sustainability sukuk, particularly for renewable energy mega projects and also for economic diversification initiatives. Now, we've looked at a number of case studies of green and sustainability sukuk. How could this be applied in the case of East Africa, the region? Now, what we've done here is we've looked at a number of jurisdictions, and we have looked at potential projects within these jurisdictions that could perhaps consider green and sustainability sukuk financing. In Somalia, for example, we could look at renewable energy infrastructure and innovation in agricultural technology. In Kenya, perhaps sustainable transportation networks, green logistics hubs, and environmentally sustainable port operations in Djibouti, and water and sanitation infrastructure in Ethiopia. These are some examples that we're thinking about, but there could be an endless number of projects which could possibly become candidates to receive financing from green and sustainability sukuk issuances. We need to ensure that they meet the criteria of the standards on which they are based on. Now, I come now to the third part of my presentation, which is building a green sukuk ecosystem. Now, when we talk about building an ecosystem for sukuk, for example, there are a number of building blocks that we need to look at and we need to ensure are in place to ensure success. Now, the first of this is regulatory guidelines. It is absolutely critical for the regulator to have buy-in and to provide clarity to the market on how the sukuk ecosystem would work in their jurisdiction. They will need basically to establish a comprehensive regulatory framework and have Sharia government structures in place to support such an ecosystem. Next, project identification. I mentioned earlier that when it comes to green and sustainability sukuk, it needs to ensure that the proceeds are used for specific projects. Hence, project identification is critical when it comes to these type of issuances. We need to be able to identify and classify eligible green and social projects for these issuances. SPV creation, if needed, in the particular financing that we're looking at. Investor engagement is critical. Now, when we do issue a green and sustainable sukuk, we would want ESG investors to be looking at it and to be investing in it. And if possible, we would want international ESG investors to look at it and invest in it as well. Hence, engaging with international investors and Islamic finance institution becomes key when we are developing this ecosystem. Capacity building is critical as well, as you will need expertise to be able to support the ecosystem that's being built. And this is where I believe CIIF could come in and play a role as well in building the expertise onshore in the region. And finally, transparent reporting is absolutely key when it comes to green and sustainability sukuk issuances. And therefore, we must have a culture that promotes rigorous reporting and sustainability KPI measurement. Now, if we were to develop an ecosystem that supports the issuance of green and sustainability sukuk, how can the banks benefit? Now, there are a number of ways that the banks can benefit. We have a few that we've listed over here. First is the bank's clients would be diversifying their liquidity. They would be wanting to access new sources of long-term funding, and they would need a variety of liquidity management tools. And the banks would be well placed to ensure that they are able to access and get these tools as needed. Next, banks will need to look into product innovation, as new products for treasury operations and investment banking would be needed to support their clients who are going into this new form of financing. And finally, banks could build their ESG leadership credentials and track record. If they were to be involved in green and sustainability sukuk issuances, you would inevitably have stronger engagement with global ESG mandates and investors, and you'll be involved in sustainability reporting. And all this leads towards building a track record and credibility in this sector. Now, what could be the role of the Somali Bankers Association and certain other regional institutions when we are talking about developing an ecosystem that supports green and sustainability sukuk? Now, first, I mentioned this a couple of times as well. The role of the regulator is absolutely critical, especially in providing clarity in how the market could operate. Hence, the SBA could play a facilitator role in terms of engagement between the industry and policymakers towards having this clarity in the market. Next, capacity building. SBA and the related institutions should be able to support the comprehensive training and market awareness programs that would be critical to ensure the success of this initiative. Collaboration is important as well, promoting cross-border partnerships and knowledge sharing. For example, what we are doing right now, this could be the start of a long-term relationship between SBA and CIIF, and also the other institutions in both jurisdictions. Pilot projects, it would be important to identify and support pilot green sukuk initiatives. I mentioned earlier that when we issued the world's first green sukuk in Malaysia, the pilot project had the support of various stakeholders. There was a desire to ensure that this debut, the world's debut green sukuk issuance, would take off the ground, and all the stakeholders were willing to play their role to ensure that it happened, and that we could then set a path for the rest of the market to follow. So over here, we have listed out a number of other projects in certain countries that could be considered to be candidates for potential financing via green and sustainability sukuk. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there could be an endless list of projects that could fall within the eligible projects for green and sustainability funding. And I hope that by looking at this, you're able to look at and consider and determine that there could be others in your area, in your jurisdictions, which could be potential candidates for this type of financing. Now, when we talk about developing an ecosystem to support a new instrument, challenges and considerations come into the picture. And what we have laid out here are some of the key obstacles that may be faced by any jurisdiction that's looking at, at catalyzing and growing a sukuk market. First is capital market depth. In the early days, you cannot run away from the fact that there may be limited number of investors that would be investing in the sukuk, and the liquidity in the secondary market may be limited as well. Nevertheless, this is something that needs to grow organically, and any market where you're starting off would be faced with the same situation. There needs to be a robust pipeline of bankable green projects, and ideally that meets international standards available. Once again, from our experience in Malaysia, in the early days of the green sukuk introduction, we found that it was not easy to find bankable green projects that would be candidates to receive funding from these type of instruments. In fact, when it came to green sukuk, it was almost invariably renewable energy projects only that met the criteria. Nevertheless, as I mentioned earlier, green sukuk followed by sustainability sukuk, these are developments that will need to take place in the market, and the various stakeholders will need to mature along with the additional products and services that are introduced in the market. Regulatory harmonization could pose a challenge as well. There needs to be alignment of frameworks across jurisdiction, and we need to also see if they are in line with global best practices. The more aligned they are with regulations across jurisdictions, and the more aligned they are with global best practices, it would make the market more accessible to a larger number of investors. Shariah governance, there needs to be sufficient capacity in both Shariah advisory and Shariah supervisory functions, and this sometimes takes time to develop. Investor communication is critical. Effective marketing and education for both Islamic and conventional ESG investors is a must. As I mentioned earlier as well, in the early days, we do find that certain ESG investors, they're not Islamic investors, they're ESG investors. They may be keen on a credit that we are bringing to the market. However, because it is in sukuk format, not a format that they are familiar with, they may not necessarily be able to come in the earlier issuances. But on a continuous basis, education and communication on a continuous basis ensures that the universe of investors that would be able to invest in the Sharia compliant version of green and sustainable instruments can be enlarged. And finally, on this particular page, we talk about human capital development. It is imperative that we have the right expertise and the right people onshore to be able to support the growth of a new Sukuk market. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my brief presentation on what Sukuk, green Sukuk and sustainability Sukuk are, some case studies to give you food for thought, and how we could look at East Africa as a region to be the next hub to be issuing green and sustainability Sukuk. Now, on that note, I would like to open the floor to Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ayaz. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ayaz, for that extremely, sorry, let me, okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Ayaz, for that extremely insightful presentation. Okay, we now move on into our Q&A session. So the attendees, if you have any question to ask our speaker, please continue to type in your questions in the chat box, Zoom chat box. I can later read them out to our speaker. Thank you. Dr. Ahmad Khadar, would you like to speak? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you
Okay.
very much, Ajini. I have one question. But before that, I would like to say that for those who are not willing to ask question, you can write your question in the chat box area. Then the moderator will feed out the question to the speaker. But I would like to ask for the case of Somalia. For us, we are recovering from years of political instability, and we have a lot of work to do with the infrastructure development. So I think for the Sukuk, for the case of Somalia, I think the first priority will be on the development of the infrastructure in Somalia, whether it is a social infrastructure or economic infrastructure. So my question is, what we can, because when you are talking about the ecosystem, you mention it clearly, the regulatory framework, as well as the project identification, as well as the public education on the Sukuk. But for Somalia, for the first time, if we want to issue Sukuk, and for us, we have a very strong Islamic financial institutions, Islamic banks. So what we can do, should we first focus on going to the Central Bank of Somalia or any other relevant authority to have the regulations on the Sukuk, or we do the feasibility analysis? So what's your advice on this? What to do first?
Right. Thank you for the question, Dr. Ahmad Khadar, and it is a very relevant question in the context of Somalia. Now, there would be a number of elements in answering the questions, so I will share them in turn. Now, first and foremost, we need to see whether there is an existing capital market in Somalia. I do apologize that I'm not familiar with the how it is in Somalia. If there is a capital market in Somalia, then it would be easy when it comes to wanting the various stakeholders to consider introducing the Sharia compliant version of it. Now, if there is no existing capital market as such in that jurisdiction, then as you mentioned, we will need to start right from the beginning. You need to have a coalition of parties that would have the objective of wanting to build this. You're absolutely right. You need to have the central bank involved. You need to have the relevant tax authorities, financial authorities involved, coming together and deciding whether this is a path that the country should take. And as I mentioned earlier, Sukuk is a method of raising funds. And if the parties, if the stakeholders decide that as a country you need to find new ways of raising funds, then the capital markets could be a good way, could be a good option where these funds could be raised. Hence, you're absolutely right, Mr. Ahmed. You need to get the relevant parties together, led by the regulators. As I mentioned, having the regulators leading the charge, backed by the industry, is probably the most critical success factor in building a Sukuk ecosystem, building a Sukuk market. I'm currently advising one particular sovereign that is keen to introduce a Sukuk market in their jurisdiction. They do not have a capital market to speak of, and hence it will be completely new. And as I am speaking with the various stakeholders, the central bank, speaking to the ministries that are involved, the desire is there, although they may not be familiar with what needs to be done. But having a group of stakeholders that have the desire to want to create it is the important first step. And then we can go along and see how to progress. And you get in touch, you get connected with experts from across the world. For example, from Malaysia, Indonesia, from the UAE and Saudi, and you get the knowledge sharing and expertise to come and assist in building the ecosystem. So yes, it is a I would say a relatively big undertaking. It could take a number of years, but if you get the relevant stakeholders together and they're prepared to embark on this journey, then it's something worth doing.
Thank you, Dr. Ayaz. I don't know, somehow my video doesn't appear, but I'm here. So moving on to the next question. We have a question from NMD, the initials. Thank you, Dr. Ayaz, for the comprehensive presentation. In your opinion, what would be the benchmark pricing suitable for the Somali market? Would it be using IDB Sukuk plus the implied credit spread for Somali sovereign paper? Thank you.
All right. Actually, I don't see that question on my end. No.
Yeah, it's on my chat box.
Okay, all right. So sorry, Adina, could you repeat the question?
Okay. Okay, in your opinion, what would be the benchmark pricing suitable for the Somali market? Would it be using IDB Sukuk plus the implied credit spread for Somali sovereign paper?
Right. This is a very interesting question. I will start off by saying that I would not be able to indicate pricing because that is a science. However, I could say this, rating is absolutely critical when it comes to issuing, Sukuk. The reason is because we're talking about investors from all over the world wanting to invest, and the pricing would be relative to the rating that's given to the paper. Yeah. So when you talk about rating, a rating for example, if you're talking about the international rating agencies, we're talking for S&P, Fitch, and Moody's. When it comes to Sukuk, rating indicates two things. Number one, the likelihood of the investor getting their coupons on time, and number two, the likelihood of the investor getting their principal back on time. And therefore, the rating agency would need to look at the sovereign. They would need to do an assessment and come up with a rating. And therefore, the rating would determine the pricing of the Sukuk. So it could be, as mentioned by the person who asked the question, it could be IDB, could be a sort of like a base from which a spread is then put for the Somali instrument. And you're right, it would be a spread, but how big the spread is would depend on what the rating would be for a paper from Somalia. I hope that gives a little bit of input into the question.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ayaz. Next one, we have a question from Mr. Zainul. Dr. Ayaz, are there any initiatives by BNM to assist Somalia's central bank in their capital market aspirations?
Right. So what I do know is that the Central Bank of Malaysia, and not really the Central Bank, more the Securities Commission of Malaysia, which deals with the capital markets, they do get frequent visits and delegations coming from all over the world. And in recent years, more from the African region, coming to learn about how we grew our capital market, what features that it has, what we put in place to ensure that it grew. So we have been doing a lot of knowledge sharing and perhaps also giving certain consultation perhaps in relation to those who have come seeking clarity from our side. So specific initiatives I'm not aware of, but we have certainly seen a lot of delegations coming and engaging with our central bank and our Securities Commission.
Okay, great. Alhamdulillah. Next one is a question from the HR department. Can you please explain the liquidity risks of Sukuk in Somalia's developing financial market?
Right. So when you talk about Sukuk, it's probably one of the most, how shall we say, the risks that are associated with Sukuk, all the risks that are associated with Sukuk are reviewed carefully, thoroughly, and it's disclosed in what is called a prospectus or an information memorandum. So what the purpose of this is so that the investors are able to review the risks and decide for themselves whether this is a risk that they would want to accept and get returns for. So, sorry, I'm looking at the question. Where's the question again? The liquidity risk?
Yep. Liquidity risk of Sukuk in Somalia's developing financial market.
Yes. So the risks would exist in the market. I heard earlier from I think Mr. Ahmad Kader that there are certain political instability in the country. Is that right? If there is a certain political instability in the country, then this would indeed impact on the rating that is accorded to the instrument, and because the risks that are connected to political instability would then lead to certain uncertainty as to whether the investors will be able to get the cash flows from the Sukuk. So yes, these are all factors that go into determining the rating that's accorded to the paper, and this would then impact on the pricing eventually.
Okay. I'll move on to the next one. From Mr. Saiful from Jakarta. How do you see credit wrapping or Shariah compliant political risk or credit enhancement mechanisms such as ICIEC Sukuk insurance being integrated into innovative Sukuk structures to improve pricing, ratings, and investor appetite for African issuers?
Now, I believe that this is one of the critical enhancements out there that could certainly assist a large number of issuers who otherwise may not be able to issue competitively priced instruments. So credit wrapping, if I understand correctly, ICIEC Sukuk Insurance is able to wrap its what do you call it? Is able to wrap the Sukuk by certain issuers, and if this is able to be done, then it would definitely open up the Sukuk market to a larger number of potential issuers and sovereigns. The current issue that's faced by a number of sovereigns is their rating may not be of a level that would attract investors, and you need to be of a certain minimum rating, and credit wrapping would be able to bring those papers up to the level where it would open them up to more investors. So certainly something which would be extremely useful in this region.
I have an earlier question that I might, before I missed it, from Mr. Abdul. He asked about, I want to know about corporate sukuk and government sukuk. How can we set up in Somalia a sukuk market, knowing that first we lack capital market authority, both as institution as well as capacity?
Right. Now, it is actually critical to have the authorities involved in any form of capital market that's going to be developed. And if there's no capital market authority, it needs to be created, or it needs to have any authority playing that role. Now, in certain jurisdictions, they may not have a separate capital market authority. It could be the central bank that plays the role. But if you would like to attract investors in the market to come in, then there needs to be regulatory certainty to ensure that the market can develop. Without such certainty, without such clarity, investors may not come in. Issuers may be unsure on how they'll be able to issue, and advisors, bankers, and the lawyers would not be able to advise the stakeholders on what are the steps that need to be taken. So it would be doing something in a vacuum, and I don't think that it's something which that can happen. Now, having said that, as I mentioned, I am consulting a number of sovereigns in relation to building a sukuk market. And if you don't have an existing market, you wouldn't have the necessary institutions in existence as well. Hence, it is not a situation of total loss. As I mentioned, if you are able to get a coalition of stakeholders who want to make, or who want to create this capital market, then that is a good first step. And then we go along the necessary journey and do the necessary steps to create the path so that a capital market could eventually be formed in that jurisdiction. All right, I see another question here from Ismail Ibrahim. According to Sharia principles, especially for loss sharing contracts like mudaraba or musharaka, an investor must share in the potential loss of the capital. As of the sukuk, as far as I know, it guarantees the face value of the capital and a fixed return, which removes the risk sharing element, making the instrument functionally identical to a conventional interest-bearing bond, which is prohibited. What do you say about this? Thank you. Right. That is a very good question. Now, Ismail Ibrahim, you're absolutely right. Mudaraba and Musharaka are profit and loss sharing. And we did have global sukuk issuances using these structures. Now, when you talk about a sukuk, you have the Sharia requirements and you have the commercial requirements. If the sukuk is not delivering the coupons that have been indicated, it will be breaching the commercial requirements. Hence, it will be an event of default, and therefore the sukuk would need to be redeemed. So previously, when you had mudaraba and musharaka sukuk, they had these requirements as well, and because in spirit they did not align. Therefore, we don't see mudaraba and musharaka sukuk being used widely in many jurisdictions when it comes to fixed income instruments nowadays. We see mudaraba, for example, being used for tier 1, tier 2 sukuk issuances, as those instruments need to be loss absorbing, and therefore mudaraba works. But today, using mudaraba and musharaka for the typical fixed income instruments is no longer common. Now, going further down in that same conversation, it says that when we look at the sukuk, it's fixed income, and it's similar, identical to conventional interest-bearing bond. Now, the fact of the matter is the commercial behavior of the sukuk and the bond is the same, in the sense that they are fixed income, right? And when we structure the sukuk, big fixed income, meaning giving a fixed coupon on a periodic basis via either a wakala sukuk or an ijara sukuk, delivering fixed income on a periodic basis, and then giving the principal at maturity. Whilst it is similar to how the bond works, the way we've structured it is Sharia compliant, and hence it is acceptable by a large group of Sharia advisors, and also acceptable to a large group of investors who have got Sharia mandates. Hence, while some may say that because they behave commercially in a similar way, the fact that there are a large group of investors who accept the Sharia compliant nature of these instruments and are okay to invest in it. There could be certain investors who, because the sukuk has got similar features and similar outcomes as a fixed income bond, they may not want to invest in it. There could be, but what we have seen in the market is large groups of Sharia compliant investors are quite happy with the way that the sukuk have been structured and are investing in it.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one from Mr. Ayub from Haldur Microfinance Somalia. Somalia has major infrastructure needs in transport, energy, and water. How can innovative sukuk models be structured to finance these large-scale projects in fragile or developing markets like Somalia?
Right. Now, we know that the investors in sukuk are large institutional investors who have got investment mandates that are quite strict, that needs to meet certain thresholds before they're able to invest. And as mentioned by the person who posed this question, a market like Somalia could be fragile and is developing. And this is where we will need to see how we can enhance the credit of the instrument that is issued. And we heard earlier from our friend Shaiful from ICIEC that credit wrapping could be considered. And if this is something which does work out, then it could enhance or elevate the credit of the paper, and then you are able to invest. You're able to attract investors to look at it and invest in it. So we will need to look at other features, other instruments to enhance the credit of a paper that is issued by perhaps a jurisdiction which is not yet credit worthy enough. I'm looking at Brother Saiful as well. There's a direct message to me, but allow me to read out what he has shared. African issuers often face challenges accessing long-term capital. That's true. Green and impact sukuk require stable risk environments. With ICIEC's risk mitigation tools, there is potential to reduce the cost of funds and mobilize GCC and Asian institutional investors. What practical structuring steps would you recommend for integrating multilateral credit guarantees in the early design phase of a sukuk transaction? Right. This is an interesting point actually, because we would need to incorporate or include the credit wrapping agency in the early part of the sukuk design as well. So typically when we are structuring a sukuk, we have various advisors. We've got the banks, we've got the tax advisors, we would have the engineering advisors, project advisors. If this is an instrument or if this is an issuance where credit wrapping is necessary, then the agency would likely need to be involved in the issuance from an early stage to ensure that how the sukuk is structured meets the requirements of the agency itself. And that would be an important step to undertake if we were to make this a reality. I see the next question over there. Given that Somalia is not rated, can sukuk be used to raise funds from the business community and diaspora? If yes, what will be the most suitable structure? Now, when we talk about sukuk, it is typically a fixed income instrument, and the typical investor universe for fixed income instruments are institutional investors, and a key requirement for these investors, although not in all cases, would be a rating. Hence, if the jurisdiction or the sovereign is not rated, raising funds from the business community and diaspora would be a challenge. By the way, if you're talking about business community and diaspora as individuals, retail investors, that is also another element that needs to be highlighted. Sukuk is not typically an instrument that retail investors would invest in due to the sophisticated nature of the instrument. It is typically an instrument where institutional investors invest in. Hence, if if the jurisdiction, if the sovereign is not rated, ideally, if a credit wrapping could give it a rating or elevate its rating, then institutional investors could look into it. Otherwise, issuing it for retail investors is not something that we see in the market.
I think for the time being, those are all the questions that we have in our chat box. But we have Dr. Ahmed. Would you like to? Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you again. My question is related to the sovereign sukuk or national sukuk. I think you mentioned it in your presentation that Indonesia is one of the countries that has already issued sovereign sukuk. What Somalia can do to follow the experience of Indonesia for issuing sovereign sukuk? I mean, who's going to be the biggest player in terms of, uh, I mean, the players can be the institutional investors as well as the government agencies. So, what can we do to make sure that Somalia in the near future get the capacity to issue sovereign sukuk?
Right. So once again, Mr. Dr. Ahmad Kadir, a question which has got various elements to it. Yes, Indonesia is the world's most prolific issuer of sovereign sukuk. They actually have always been issuing bonds, and when they wanted to issue sukuk, they realized that their laws didn't really support the issuance of sukuk. So it took a number of years for the Indonesian government to look at the laws, amend the laws that allow so that the sovereign could issue sukuk. So they had to take certain extra steps to do so. And the reason why they had to do these additional steps was if they didn't do it, then they would not be able to meet the Shariah requirements, and they may not be able to get certain investors coming in. So in Somalia's case, as we have already established, there is no capital market as such in Somalia. Therefore, if we are looking towards issuing a sovereign sukuk out of Somalia, what we will need to do is we will need to get the relevant stakeholders together, and this would very likely be the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, and if they feel that there is a need to raise funds and they would want to tap the capital markets to do so, then there will be a number of steps that need to be taken. This include looking at the existing laws to see if the laws actually allow the government to issue to raise funding via fixed income instruments. If it is not, then the laws may need to be amended to allow it to be done, and then we need to see whether the laws allow the sovereign to structure sukuk. Typically, when it comes to sukuk, we would have assets that are required to facilitate the transaction. We need to see whether the laws prohibit this, or if they do, then what amendments can be made. So there needs to be a study of all the applicable laws and regulations to see what is allowed, what is not allowed. Then we need to see what is missing, what are the gaps, and all of this we need to be laid out and filled up before we can embark on a potential issuance. Additionally, and this is also quite critical, to reach out to agencies that could provide credit enhancement so that a potential issuance would have a rating that's elevated and therefore open the sovereign up to a larger group of investors.
Okay, Dr. Ayaz, we have, I think, the last two questions from Mr. Abdul. Yeah.
Okay. Can large national assets such as ports, airports, fiber network, oil blocks, or fisheries licenses legally be transferred to an SPV? Okay. Now, to the first question, this is a very relevant question. And now, in certain jurisdictions, national assets cannot be transferred to other parties, especially an SPV, which is not an SPV is a company that's set up typically in a tax haven, so on and so forth. So it can't be done. However, we have seen that certain laws and regulations have been amended to allow this to be done to facilitate sukuk transactions. Now, another thing that we see in sukuk is whilst we wouldn't want the legal ownership to be transferred to an SPV, under common law, you can transfer what is called the beneficial ownership. And that transfer of beneficial ownership is sufficient for a sukuk issuance. So the legal ownership remains with the sovereign, but the beneficial ownership is transferred to the SPV for the purpose of facilitating the sukuk issuances. So in certain countries where we have common law, this is not a big issue. For example, in Malaysia, we've done sukuk issuances where we've transferred hospitals, prisons, so on and so forth to the SPV for the sukuk. In certain other jurisdictions, for example, in Saudi, they are not allowed to transfer assets, land, property to non-Saudi, for example. So they would be looking at different types of sukuk structures to facilitate the sukuk issuance. Yeah. Now we're talking about for infrastructure such as roads, which cannot be owned privately. What structure will Somalia use? Istisna and Ijara, Wakalah-based investment certificate, right? Yes, these are all possibilities. Additionally, the property or the property or the infrastructure that is being developed using the sukuk funds, they don't necessarily have to be the underlying asset for the sukuk. So there are numerous ways that we can overcome this. But yes, istisna and ijara, we've actually used it in Malaysia as well when it came to our highway sukuk. We've used that structure, and and now wakalah is probably the most common sukuk structure that we see in global sukuk issuances. Yes.
I think one last question, Dr. Ayaz, from Mr. Ayub of Halduf Microfinance, the same person just now. Okay. In emerging markets like Somalia, what mechanisms can be used to reduce risk for investors in sukuk, particularly when the market is small and still developing?
So this is a very interesting question, because risk is something which is always present, even in the most stable jurisdiction. A risk is always present. I guess the difference is on the extent and on the depth of that risk. But as mentioned earlier, in fact, I think this was also mentioned a number of times. If your, if the rating that you have is not of a level that is investment grade, for example, then you have mechanisms like credit wrapping. As mentioned earlier, ICIEC is there, and also the Asian Development Bank. They also, this is of course in the ASEAN region, we've got the ASEAN Development Bank, which has given credit wrapping to bond and sukuk issuances in order to enable those corporates in those countries to be able to access the capital markets. Of course, credit wrapping comes with a certain amount of fee, but the benefit is that an entity or an issuer that otherwise may not be able to access the market is able to do so. So this is something which would be critical in areas, in regions where on their own, on a standalone basis, the issuer may not be able to get the rating which would give them access to the capital markets.
We have last two more from Mr. Abdul. This question is quite long. Maybe Dr. Ayaz can see yourself. Yeah.
So integration into the Somali financial ecosystem. How can Sukuk certificates be integrated into mobile money platforms, national payment switch? Can Somalia create a secondary Sukuk market on the stock exchange, regional Islamic exchanges, or OTC? Very good questions, actually. Now, in where we are in Malaysia, for example, the retail market, they do not invest in Sukuk. It's not something which is really done over here. The ones that invest in Sukuk tend to be the high net worth individuals. So what we don't see Sukuk being offered in these mobile platforms, so on and so forth, because the investors are sophisticated institutional investors. They have got their own system as to how they look at it and how they invest in it. Having said that, in the past, I think 12 months, we have heard a lot about tokenization using blockchain. And one of the cases that they would really want to see going on the blockchain and tokenized format are actually sukuk and bonds. They want to see if we were to move it onto the blockchain, whether we would be able to attract retail investors to invest in this product. It is still open to see how it develops. But in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and in most jurisdictions, for individuals, for retail investors, investing in sukuk is not common. Hence, the reason why we don't see it coming onto these platforms in big numbers. There may be already, and there could be some that are successful, but we don't see it as yet. So in the case of Somalia, if it is not something that is done by the community or by the individual investing community in Somalia, then it would be we need to see whether it's actually worth embarking on these initiatives.
There's one last one, Dr. Ayaz.
Yeah.
Okay, from Mr. NMD. If I may suggest that usage of asset tokenization be considered to offer out retail sukuk to the Somali global diaspora, the Somali Central Bank here has the leverage to recycle wealth back to Somalia.
Yes. This suggestion is basically something which is now being looked at in various forms in the various jurisdictions, right? Offering sukuk via tokenization, it makes it accessible to, when you talk about tokenization, typically sukuk, right, that we see, the minimum denomination is $200,000 or perhaps $50,000. So they are in very large denominations because this is related to the type of investors that invest in sukuk. But when we talk about tokenization, you're basically bringing it down, you're fractionalizing it into units that even individuals can consider investing in them. So it is a developing area. We are going to be seeing, I think, in a matter of months, we're going to be seeing various jurisdictions offering bonds and sukuk via the tokenized route, and we're going to be looking at it eagerly to see how it progresses.
Okay, we are about 15 minutes more before we end the session. I think, thank you so much, Dr. Ayaz, for answering all the Q&A, very engaging. Perhaps, inshallah, we can further have further session on this. Moving on, before we wrap up, may I welcome Dr. Azura Uthman, the Chief Executive Officer of the Chartered Institute of Islamic Finance Professionals, for her brief sharing. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina. And thank you, Dr. Ayaz, for the good sharing just now. Just like to have a few minutes to just give a bit of introduction about our organization. I'm just trying to see whether I can share my slides. Just like to confirm that you can see the slides that I'm sharing.
We can see, but it's not in full yet, Puan.
Right. Okay. Let me put on slide mode. Okay. Thank you very much to everyone and to Dr. Ahmad Kadir for actually arranging for this webinar, and thank you to my team as well to that actually come up with the dates and the logistics for this particular session. Thank you to Dr. Ayaz. Dr. Ayaz also happened to be our CIIF Council member, and he's quite known in the Sukuk market, capital market in Malaysia. And I think judging from all the questions that come and all the answers that have been given, I think we have had a really productive session. I just like to have a bit of time to actually introduce our organization to the participants, I think, especially to the bankers in Somalia and all other participants that are in session today. I understand actually we have about participants from more than 5 countries, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go straight to our organization. Let me see whether I can move this. Okay, sorry, I think there's a bit of lag. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so basically CIIF, or Chartered Institute of Islamic Finance Professional, was established as a professional body in 2015. And we were established through an industry charter called Islamic Finance Profession Charter for 3 associations related to Islamic finance: the Islamic Banking Association, the Investment Banking Association, as well as the Malaysian Takaful Association, came together to form this charter to recognize Chartered Institute of Islamic Finance Professionals as the professional body to develop talents in Islamic finance. We are basically the professional body not just for Malaysia, but we also have members who comes from all over the world. Currently, I think we have about a quarter of our members are from other countries. And so basically the charter represents the commitment by the members or the signatories to the charter to professionalize the Islamic finance profession. And apart from these signatories, in 2023, we also received a new associate member, which is the Central Bank of Djibouti. And we actually are inviting any interested bodies or associations, or even the central bank who wants to become part of this charter, to become an associate member. So basically, by becoming associate member, we are coming together to basically come together to actually promote this agenda of professionalizing the Islamic finance practitioners. So basically, our purpose is to provide professional education and also become a platform for professionals to come together to share knowledge and also to network, to expand innovation in Islamic finance. For example, like the session that we have today, we are sharing whatever experience that we have in Malaysia with the East African in terms of how we can develop Islamic finance further in other regions in the world. And So our value proposition is to develop professionals to build public confidence of the stakeholders in Islamic finance. So by actually promoting ethical practices through adherence to our code of ethics and standards of professional conduct, we are promoting high ethical services and conduct amongst our member in their day-to-day work. So as far as we know today, CIIF is the only professional body in the world that confer the professional certification. So just a bit of glimpse of where we are right now. We have members from 23 countries, about 1,000 plus members. And we also have CEOs and board members as our chartered member. And currently we have about 300 plus learners who are undergoing our program to become chartered members. And we already have established online systems, exam systems for people from all over the world to actually take our program online. You don't need to come to Malaysia to actually do the qualification. And so far we have issued 7 standards and guidelines for our members. So what we offer is basically we offer professional membership and professional certification. Sometimes we do have requests to do bespoke training program, especially for executive, for leaders. And if you have any programs in your countries, we can do program mapping such that it become pathway for people in those countries to become our members as well. And as what we have done today, we have pool of members who are subject matter experts whom we will always like to profile and give them opportunity to share the expertise, not just in Malaysia, but also in other countries, so that together we can try to expand the knowledge of Islamic finance in other countries. Next, I just want to go through about to just explain a bit about our program. Why do we have this chartered professional in Islamic finance program, and why do we have this chartered membership, and also a bit about how to get to the chartered membership status. So CPIF, or the short form for the professional program, is about building a community of professionals who collectively promote the interests of its members and also the Islamic finance profession, as can be witnessed today. What we are doing, basically promoting knowledge of Islamic finance to members and also potential members, and wherever possible, we want to basically invite Islamic finance practitioners to elevate themselves to become chartered and to get the professional status. And because by being a professional, you are basically elevating yourself in terms of knowledge and capability. And by becoming a professional member, you are also showing that you are also required to abide to our standards on continuous professional development. So by having this professional membership, the stakeholders, the companies, or the organizations that employ you knows that you are someone who continuously upskilling yourself in terms of knowledge in Islamic finance. So the program that we have is have 2 specialization tracks. One is the banking and the other one is takaful. The program is actually a 15-module program that covers the foundation, intermediate, proficient, and chartered level. But in terms of but these 15 modules are basically prepared for those who are entering into the Islamic finance industry without any prior knowledge in banking or takaful, or in Islamic banking or takaful. So we have actually various pathway to our membership. So those who have no knowledge, who just entered, or you're fresh graduate who wants to come into the Islamic finance industry, there is the standard pathway that is going through, that is that requires you to go through the whole modules. But if you are already working in the Islamic finance industry, depending on the number of years that you have, you can go through the management or senior management fast track. So the more number of years that you have, then the less number of modules that you need to go through. So basically, with your experience is being recognized as exemption to some of the modules that needs to be done. But the quickest pathway to become our chartered member is through the leadership fast track, which are available for senior leadership, people who have been in the industry, Islamic finance industry, for at least 10 years. And they are holding management positions, I mean heads or C-suites or CEO or board members. And what they need to do is to just to go through a 3-day masterclass, and upon passing an assessment after the masterclass, then they can be onboarded as chartered member. So those are the various pathway for anyone of the participants today who are interested to become our chartered member. However, recently we have also started to recognize certain qualifications, especially if you have a Chartered Islamic Finance Professional qualification from CIIF, or if you have MIFP or EMIF certifications from INSEAF. If you're graduates of these 3 programs from INSEAF, you are and provided you have at least 3 to 5 years of Islamic finance experience, you will be onboarded as chartered member immediately after completing our professionalism and ethics module. So so this is another pathway. If you feel that you want to have a master's degrees, then you can actually do the one offered by INSEAF, because after you've completed the master's degrees, you can have a direct pathway to become our chartered member. So that's another option from doing the whole CPIF program that we have that I mentioned just now. The other program that we have started to recognize is also the certified qualification in Islamic finance by IFFIM in Malaysia. So again, if you have this qualification and at least 3 years of experience in Islamic finance, you can be onboarded as chartered members after completing our professionalism and ethics module. The latest pathway that we have started to come up with is the recognition of prior learning. So basically, if you have a doctorate, high qualification in Islamic finance, and you have actually practiced it for many, many years, you can actually try to come to become a member through this pathway, whereby that you need to basically pass an assessment through answering a challenge questions. And if you have passed that, you can actually also become onboarded as our chartered member. So these are the conversion tracks that we have currently. So you might want to ask, okay, what's the benefit of becoming our member? First and foremost is a professional status, and you can be part of whatever programs that is being offered by CIIF. For example, sometimes we have live webinars, especially special ones for our members where you can have access to. And sometimes we have a sharing session from our members, virtual workshops. And if you happen to be in Malaysia and we happen to have a networking session, you can have a physical networking among our members, because our members comes from various organization. Some of them are takaful practitioners, some of them are in academia, some of them are from banking, and we also have people from other organization that practices in Islamic finance. For information, we also have members who are students, because we admit members from student member to associate and up to the highest level, which is the chartered member. So basically, this networking session will provide opportunity for, peer sharing in terms of knowledge, and also for young members of the industry to have, discussion or contact with the senior leadership. So thereby giving a lot of opportunities for, potential career development, or even some, maybe some knowledge sharing among themselves. And uh, through more of this session, we are hoping, when we have a lot of, the professional coming together, sharing their ideas, thought leadership, we can basically be the platform for you to provide advocacy on anything that advances the interests of Islamic finance. So it's either at the local arena or in the global situation. And we also provide our members volunteering opportunity to share whatever knowledge that they have through mentoring sessions and sharing session about what the career that they're having to other members, so that they can have an idea about their career pathway. And of course, we also have lifestyle benefits. Uh, Members will get a members discount, and whenever we have any programs with other organizers that we collaborate with, we will try to get members discount for our members. So these are some of the things that you can benefit from being our member. So if you want to know more, you can follow us on our social media. You can scan on the QR code if you want to have any further details about us, or you can just WhatsApp us on our mobile, or you can go to our website, which is CIIF-global.org, if you want more details about us. So we hope to have more sessions on this, and hopefully to have more members from Somalia, and inshallah we have more engagement with uh, Dr. Abdul Qadir after this. Hopefully we have more subsequent webinar sessions, and maybe we have a little bit more engagement in terms of how CIIF and SBA can collaborate in terms of, maybe apart from webinar, maybe there are some other programs that we can do together, and something that even like starting a kind of onboarding of members, and to create a community of CIIF professionals in Somalia, so that Somalia can have its own, uh, chapter of CIIF in Somalia. So inshallah, that will be some of the things aim that we have for the future. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time today. And for those from this part of the region, thank you for your time. Spend the tonight together with CIIF. And for those in Africa, have a pleasant day for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Thank you once again, Dr. Azura and Dr. Ayaz, for your valuable insights and for spending your time with us today. We also wish to express our sincere appreciation to the CEO of the Somali Bankers Association, Dr. Ahmad Khadar Jamal, for supporting this initiative and opening the door to a future and meaningful collaboration with CIIF. To all attendees from the East African banking community, SBA member banks, CIIF members worldwide, thank you so much for joining us. We truly hope today's session will be the start of many more collaborative engagements that will advance Islamic finance, sukuk development, and professional capacity building across the region. A feedback form will be shared shortly, and we appreciate your responses. With that, we officially conclude today's session, Innovative Sukuk Models for Africa, Sustainability, Green Sukuk, and Impact Financing. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah, and thank you everyone. Have a pleasant day ahead.
Assalamualaikum.
Bye.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you.
Thank you.